Welcome back, everyone, for another great session on track 6. My name is Jean-Pascal Chauvet. I'm a strategic consultant at Ab Initio Software, and I'm also the track producer for track 6 at the MIT CDOIQ 2022. This is going to be a recorded session. Now, a bit of housekeeping. Feel free to post your questions, and the panelists and speakers will be responding to those questions today, tomorrow, in the next few days. The topic is tips on board level data strategy conversations. And to lead this panel is Maria Villar, Head of Enterprise Data Strategy and Transformation at SAP. Now, again, this is a recorded session. You're welcome to send your question during the video playback, and the panel will respond to your question. So, Barry, let's send the recording.
Thank you for the introduction, and welcome to all of you who've joined this session. Today's session is a panel discussion on how to have an effective conversation with your board executives. You're going to hear tips and techniques, best practices, and lessons learned from two very seasoned data executives from two vastly different industries who have had this conversation. I'm Maria Villar, and I will be your moderator, and I will also wrap it up at the end. And some of you may remember me from last year's MIT CDOIQ event. I gave a presentation on how to have an effective data strategy. And having an effective data strategy and then communicating it to a very important constituent like your executive board members is a key to success. These board members can absolutely help or hinder your program as well as your career. So let's first cover why this is such an important and relevant topic for CDOs today. There's really 3 points I want to cover. The first point is that there was a recent study done by PwC last year where they analyzed 1,000 annual reports from companies all across the world in all industries. They didn't just interview CDOs, they actually looked at the annual report. And what they found was pretty interesting. They found that 2/3 of companies are talking more about data and data-related topics to their shareholders than they did 5 years ago. And the frequency of data references has increased by about 17% since 2017. And the third point in the study was that a typical company now refers to data on their annual report about 420 times, 48 times, 78% more than in 2017. Now, by the way, when they talk about data, this can be AI or analytics or security or privacy. So clearly, all of these institutions are realizing that this data topic is very important and very relevant. That data is an increasing asset that has both value and risk. So that's point number one. Now, to address all of these risks and opportunities, more and more companies are hiring CDOs, or whether they call them the CDO or the CDAO or head of data. And that also came out in the PwC survey, that about half of the companies that they looked at had just hired a CDO within the last 2 years. So clearly, this is one way that companies are addressing these risks and opportunities is by hiring this head of data role. And I personally have seen where my colleagues are having more and more responsibility. The role is really changing. It's becoming more value-based. There's a lot more risk, certainly a lot more opportunity. And that many of my peers are being given that opportunity to talk to their CDOs, to their board. And that's why this topic is so relevant. And the PwC study also mentioned that for those companies that had this head of data role, that they articulated that data topic in the annual reports a lot more clearly. So it's an important topic, it's relevant, and it's increasing in importance in the remit of a head of data senior executive. So that's why this panel discussion is so relevant. So let's get started by first introductions. You all know me. Again, I'm Maria Villar from SAP, Head of Enterprise Data Strategy and Transformation. And now I want to turn it over first to Ellen for her introduction.
Thank you, Maria. And my name is Ellen Nielsen. I'm the Chief Data Officer within Chevron, and what you just described resonates with me. Our organization as data organization was inaugurated 2 years ago. Of course, we have done a lot of data before, but the role of the Chief Data Officer started in 2020. So I'm responsible for the data strategy and innovation, as well as what we call data performance, so the governance around data, the architecture, data science, and also data literacy when it comes to change management and also communication. So how do we make the company more data-driven in their decisions and also generating value? We created a data imperative, a digital imperative, which is called Data's in My DNA. So we run the program from my team out and trying to influence the company to use data in the right way. I also would say, maybe why is it so important for us? We just recently announced that we will change the company by October. So we go along the value chain in the company. So you can imagine a value chain is connecting data. So we are looking very much forward to this conversation because it will play a very big business role. So Maria, I think you asked me also to do a kind of an icebreaker, a little bit of personal story here. And I would like to share one from some years ago, and how does it resonate with the setting of the topic today. So I was very fortunate to get a lot of different roles in different industries around data, digital, but also supply chain. And so I felt always very lucky to get these opportunities to develop myself and to engage with different businesses. So one day I was actually sitting together with a president of Latin America, and at the dinner table I said, "Hey, I'm so lucky. I'm very lucky to be here and being as a CIO at that time." And he said to me, "Ellen, you are not lucky. That has nothing to do with luck." So I was a little bit shocked by his answer. And then we come to a different conversation, so I didn't dig deeper into that, but he sent me a book home. And the book was called Good Luck, Create the Conditions for Your Success in Life and Business. So what this story tells us in the fable, it's a kind of a fairy tale. It talks about two knights who are looking for a four-leaf clover in an enchanted forest. And the approach of the two knights, how they come to their basically finding that it's very difficult to find, but succeeding it. So, and I think that the knight who was succeeding basically created conditions that people help each other, that there is more creativity, that he's really looking for solutions and not taking it as a victim, but really try to get his best out, and he finally succeeded. But he created also the conditions of this openness environment and never gave up. So he was very resilient. Even if there was a setback, he basically come back and said, "Okay, that was a big learning opportunity. I will try it in a different way and will be successful." So what does it mean to me and also to this topic is sometimes you will have successes and sometimes you will have setbacks in those conversations. So every time when you have a setback, take this as a learning opportunity so that you can iterate and make it next time more appealing, more, let's say, better in these conversations also with the board. So don't take it as a career limiting opportunity, but take it as a challenge and also, yeah, prove your resiliency in this topic. So that's maybe my icebreaker for this round today.
Thanks, Ellen. That was good advice. All right, Denise, over to you.
Okay, thank you. And Ellen, that was wonderful. I want to go look up that book. So I'm Denise Letcher. I'm the Chief Data Officer for PNC Bank. I am an accountant by education, and I have a strong belief that once you know the details of how to do accounting, you can basically leverage that to do anything. I do report to the Chief Risk Officer of PNC, and I have a highly energetic team that really can drive and implement anything across the enterprise. So because I report to the Chief Risk Officer, I do have a second line of defense enterprise data risk team. They look at data controls, data risk metrics and reporting, and challenge the businesses on controls. And then with my CDO function, I have an enterprise data governance team that does the procedures across the data lifecycle, implements a lot of data quality, and performs a lot of data quality as well as data remediation. Also, I have a team that is the product owner for the centralized data ecosystem. We prioritize the investments and manage the corresponding capital initiatives. And we also do a lot of model data provisioning. And then I also want to mention my team that is the Analytics Competency Center. This is where we have advanced analytical usage practices. We have business data architecture design, and we have a business information team. And as I said, I have a highly energetic team. Our core belief in everything that we do, and our core belief as we work across the enterprise, is that data is an asset and drives banking. And as long as we keep that in mind, we feel that we will be very successful. So as far as an icebreaker, I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction here. But, this is about data, talking to the board. We all deal with data every day. As I said, data is an asset. So I want to share with you my least favorite piece of data. And that is, if predictions by the Oxford Hare Foundation come to pass, the number of natural redheads everywhere will continue to dwindle until there are 9 left by the year 2100. So I just had to put that in there. Hopefully that will give you a little laugh. And then also, I just wanted to share just something about myself, in that as long as I can remember, I have loved to read. I've been reading, I don't know, since 5 years old, and I always want to know, I always want to understand. I'm in a book club. We're currently reading The French Braid by Anne Tyler, and I just encourage people to read and try to know, try to understand, and never, ever, ever hesitate to ask the question.
Wow, thank you, Denise. That was great. I did not know about the redhead assumption there, so have to keep that in mind. And also, it's interesting that your job also includes risk. I am seeing more and more that the chief data officer, and Ellen, your role is very broad as well. As I said, it's becoming more and more broad and combining what I said, kind of data voices. So, thank you for joining the panel. This is going to be great. Okay, so let's kind of jump in to the panel discussion with the first question. So the first question is for each of you to share with us, and we'll start maybe Denise let's start with Ellen first. How did you prepare for the board presentation? So first of all, how did the board meeting even come to fruition? Was it something that you solicited, that you asked for? Did the board ask for your presentation? Was it part of a bigger topic, like maybe a digital transformation or something, or was it really a topic just about data? So that's the question. And then also with that question is, then how did you prepare, right? Did you have pre-reads? Did you have to review with a lot of different constituents? Just tell us about the whole process of preparing, the selection, the preparing, and then the presenting. And we'll talk about topics later, but let's just first talk about preparing and presenting. So Ellen, I'll start with you.
Yeah, first of all, I'm reporting to the CIO. That means when we have board conversations, that's typically brought up by the CIO through the leadership and then going to the board. It can go both ways. Sometimes they ask for an update. Typically, it's not always a data update. It's always combined in a digital space with something else. Typically, there are 2 topics coming together. So you have to discuss first, okay, what are the shares of the time? So what is the more important topic and how we want to drive this? So that's maybe how it typically starts. In terms of aligning, I would always say we have three things to prepare. So first is, of course, what content do you want to bring? Yeah. The second is what kind of alignment you have to drive in terms of the content you want to bring, and is there enough resonance with that? And then I think the third one is always being very passionate about it. I think it's very important that you come with the topics you're really passionate about, you can tell the story, and you can relate it to the board. So I think from a stakeholder alignment, I would always say it's very important to get aligned with the advisors of the board. So typically there are certain people who are preparing the content on the agenda, and they know very well what's going on that day. So it's always good to know what else is on the agenda roughly, if it's not kind of a confidential area, but it's good what's in the mind of the board, so that you know what the advisor can give you in terms of what you have to, the watch points. The other, of course, are advisors, you know, the CIO, or even leadership between the CIO and the board. And then looking for some other stakeholders within the board, you have maybe connections to already prepare and say, okay, what's important for you? What do you want to spotlight there, so that you get really good alignment? So when we talk about the content, typically in my area, it's 5 to 7 slides, not more than that. Should be not too detailed. It's a pure pre-read. So when you go into the board, there is no slides shown. It's a pure talking point, and typically you have maybe 30 minutes, depends on the topic, 30, 45 minutes, but you have maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes for the key messages and the stories you want to present. And then it's kind of a free flow in terms of conversation, questions, question and answers, points making, feedback provided. So the rest is more free flowing. So saying this, when it's free flow, you have to be basically prepared with your content, and also think about what questions can come, which are within your content, maybe also with outside of your content. So that's very important. So I would say my main point is, do I have the right content? And then 50% is really the questions. What kind of questions do I expect? Can I be prepared with the answer? So for example, a question could be, what value creation have we done over the last quarter? So you have to have your numbers ready. You have to have your stories ready, and also the challenging topics. You know, typically board members remember things from far ahead. So you have to even talk to people who are in the seat before you, or maybe have dealt with certain topics in the data space, so that you are aware about some past experiences, so that you can answer those questions. I also would say, from our content, keep always the business objective in mind. So don't think too much about how you are currently working. It's more about what you're working on and why you're working it on. So they are not very interested typically in the process or in the details. So they want to really the outcomes, the business relations, and how does that really change the business? That's always in their mind in terms of how you prepare yourself and prepare some questions. I also would say what's very typical for us in preparation, think about what they will ask you, how they can help. So prepare the content. What could their stake be in helping you succeeding with the plan or with the roadmap or the strategy you have done? So yeah, I would say 3 things: content, then the alignment and the passion, and just be prepared from a content perspective with the questions is maybe my recommendation for preparation and getting ready.
So Ellen, if I can kind of recap, it sounded like in your case, it was combined, the data topic was combined with another topic that kind of the CIO decided. So the CIO makes the decision about the timing of the data topic with his or her other topics. And does he also allocate the time? So whether it's, and usually what's a typical time? Is it 30 minutes, 15 minutes? I mean, is there a, shorter the better?
Yeah, I would say for the data topic is typically the bigger share than the other topic. So the other topic is typically a quick update that you're not eating too much time. So it was maybe 15 minutes for the other topic and then 30 minutes for the data topic. But it's roughly 45 minutes to maximum an hour in the board. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other question before I jump to Denise would be then, you made a really good point, which is know who is the person who actually prepares the board and who runs these meetings, has an incredible amount of information. And so kind of knowing who goes before you and who goes, maybe afterwards, and kind of what other topics are on the agenda, so that you can get a sense maybe of the mood before you walk in with your session. I think that's good advice as well. Okay, Denise, how about for you? How did you prepare, present?
No, absolutely. Well, first, how our board meetings get scheduled is that I actually present my business yearly to the board. That schedule is set for the year, so I know exactly when that is going to happen. But I also wanted to mention that the board does request key initiative updates, ones that they want to hear, and that I'm usually involved with that a couple times a year. So I wanted to talk about, if you're invited to the board, just to give a update with a key initiative, that's generally with the whole group of people who work on the initiative, the technology, the business, the data people, that you have a much shorter time frame to prepare. And what I do with those types of updates is I leverage what materials already exist, because there's always project updates or status reports. Often the board has seen a high-level summary of some of those, and I want to stay consistent to what they've already seen about a key initiative. So I leverage materials that are already in place. Now, in regards to my business update to the board, that requires a lot more preparation. I start 2 months in advance, and I assume that it needs to be complete a few weeks before the board meeting. But truthfully, I'm always making tweaks up until a couple days before, based on feedback that I'm getting. But what I start doing 2 months in advance is I, have my presentations from all the previous years, because I do have themes that I know the board likes to hear about, and I want to make sure I carry those themes forward. Additionally, it's very important to work with the person who gathers all the board materials to see, what did the last couple months of business presentations and updates look like? I want to see trends. I want to see topics. The people who work with the board, they will have a standard format that you should leverage. And so you really want to work with them and make sure that you're following the standard format that the board is used to seeing their updates in. I think also, our board, we get new members almost every year. So you really want to know who's on the board, who's going to be in the meeting, and you should identify those board members that know more about your business, because those are the ones that will most likely be answering your questions. And I think it helps as you're presenting to be familiar with the board members as you're giving your update. Now, I will also say that as I'm putting this together, Ellen mentioned this, to me, you really got to determine your content, and you've got to make sure your content is high level and important to the board. And this takes some time. So I leverage my communications team to help me get it to be a very good executive level presentation. I leverage my managers on reviewing content. I find my boss's feedback invaluable on the high level topics that I'm choosing to update the board. And then I also have some enterprise information committees that I'll even run my draft board presentation by, to make sure that they feel that these are the hottest topics, most important to the company, that the board would want to hear an update about. Generally, since these meetings are set so far in advance, you're given a standard 20 minutes for your update. But I don't hesitate to ask for more. Last year, I asked for 30 minutes, and that's some advice I would have for anybody. If you're looking at it and you feel you're getting squeezed and you've critical messaging that takes longer, definitely I would ask for it. See what they say. If they say no, oh well. But if you think you need more time, I would ask for it. And definitely, I mentioned this before, the content has to be interesting, clear, concise. You have to put your point on the page. You do not want people to try to come to their own conclusion, because everyone will come to a different conclusion. I think it is very important at the front to have an executive summary. And I think it's very important to clarify, am I here for an approval or an update? You should set that straight from the get-go. And it probably, I just have to say this because we live in the world of acronyms. No acronyms in your board presentation. Or if you use an acronym, spell it out first.
Wow, it's great advice. Denise, a couple of follow-ups. So in your case, you did use slides. There was slide decks that were used, as opposed to what Ellen was saying, which is no slides, which is also, now you got the two ends of the spectrum, right? And then, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would say it's probably about 8 pages.
So yeah, a small,
yeah,
and 20 minutes.
Yeah, executive summary with about 6 points, clarifying it's an update, and then there's 1 slide for each of my points.
And Denise, the other question is your yearly profile to the board, is that always about the same time of the year? I mean, is it at the beginning of the year? Is it at the end, or does it kind of fluctuate?
So when I started out, so I've been in this position about 8 years, and it was always in the summer. And I really did not prefer that. And I also found it was the middle of the year, and I didn't quite have some things done that I would love to have showed them. So probably 4 years in, I requested going in the October, November timeframe. So that's when I get my update. I find that to be a great time frame, because if you had any issues, they're resolved. If you had some capital projects you started at the beginning of the year that are big enterprise initiatives, you have a lot of ground that at least you've taken by then. So for me personally, I just prefer that time frame.
Okay, great. And just to share some of what I've seen as well as in working with with colleagues, is that oftentimes the CDO gets asked to come to the board within the first 6 months of when they started their job, which is really interesting. And I've had 3 CDO positions that sort of gotten 1 chance out of the 3, but more and more it seems like the board wants to hear from the CDO right away, as opposed to kind of waiting for a year or so. So that's also pretty interesting. Now, we've talked about content. Yeah, go ahead, Denise. Yeah.
Well, so I would say that when I first started in my role, I definitely was there 3 times that year, because they did want to hear observations, strategy, what you were going to put in place, what you were doing, what you're sharing with the regulators, things like that. So, but now I'm in this yearly cadence.
Yeah, good. And now we've talked about content quite a few times, and I know that we've talked about it at a pretty high level, but if you both could just share a little bit more of what exact topics did you cover, I think that would be helpful for the audience. So Ellen, if you want to take a shot at that.
Sure, I can take it away. So for my situation, as it was really early start of the organization as such, it was an update on the strategy, so very high level strategy, what the key points were at that time. And then, of course, they're very interested in value generation. So for us, the value part, what is the value of data and insights for the business was the critical thing. So I was bringing basically a lot of stories, how this is executed, done on the business side, to give them also some understanding how does it impact really on the bottom line. The other thing, what they're interested in typically is, are we competitive? How are others doing it in our industry? Are we in a good space? Are we on a still where we have to work on in certain areas? How are we doing in terms of our competition? So that was very important to them. And then I would say the other question I typically get is, okay, if we do more, do we get more out? So what's the lever? And is there something what you or the organization needs to even accelerate or even increase the speed of value? So they will ask maybe, okay, is our size of the organization the right one? where do we have gaps, and how can they basically help doing that. The other topic maybe I want to mention is, from a topic perspective, I think Denise spoke about it. So some key initiatives. So of course they know very well the key initiatives. Typically these are digital initiatives where data is a part of it. So they want to understand how are we doing there? Is it progressing? What can they do? They also would say, got good advice one time in terms of when I have an ask. So don't have it as an ask, but offer the board some options. So offer the board some options where they can get engaged, either from a change management perspective, or really from a budget perspective, or from a decision perspective, where there has to be a decision to be made. And that was very, I would say, very good. I can really say our board, he was bringing it up in terms of his speeches to the workforce about our digital imperative, data is in my DNA. So that really helped to say, okay, it's really the talk of our CEO, what relates to data, and he's really communicating in that way. That really helps tremendously for the organization. I think, as I said, I would never bring a topic in terms of what we did and how we did it. I think that's too much detail. They are just interested in the results, but they love stories. So I can only tell stories is always when they see something happening in the field where data really brings them to the next level, that excites them tremendously. So I put a lot of effort in the right stories to share, which are maybe new things, or where an organization tried something new and really overcome and created tremendously value. So these are the best. And I'm not putting basically the data organization in the center. It's always the business who is in the center of that story, and we are an enabling organization and help them to accelerate in that space. So that's maybe the topics typically I would say are relevant, should not be too detailed. So the board is very interested in competitive performance and value.
Denise, how about you? Anything more to add to that?
Yes, I would say, board members are definitely people who read the newspapers a lot, watch the news a lot. So I look to see, is there anything out there in the industry or the regulatory environment that I may need to address? So one of the things I'm thinking about and watching now is the proposed climate regulation. And data, there's a lot of different types of data, lots of different types of data sources for that. And we'll need to also speak to the quality of that data, because it's new and different data than we've ever used before. So that's something that I'm considering that's out there from a regulatory perspective. Will that be one of my key topics? I also need to address how I'm managing data risk in some way. In the past, I've included critical data quality metrics. The board members like to see those data quality metrics because that gives them confidence. And one of the board members told me they were at a meeting of board members from various companies, and he was asking them if people had those types of metrics. So they're all definitely, the board members also are talking with each other on topics too, and they're very versed in that. I would also say, and Ellen touched on this, call out key achievements that help the overall company. Don't think of just, hey, this is the great thing my team did. That's more in the process. You want to step back and say, how is data helping the overall company? Like, for example, how is data enabling a business strategy through data analytics and science? And maybe while you're given that update, you could tie it to a previous presentation and connect the dots for them. Or any enterprise initiative that data played a key role is great to talk about, such as a merger and acquisition, things like that. So, and definitely, as Alan said, stories, peer comparison, analogies, anything to bring it to life for them is extremely valuable. I think it's important to always talk a little bit about the data culture. the data culture of the company that you're in, and just try to think of, think as a board member and be confident. Be confident while you're giving your update.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I was going to ask you, did you present risk, because you also have a risk role? So I would assume that is something you need to address as well. But absolutely, really good advice. So now I'm going to start with Denise first. I've always started with Ellen, but this time the next question is really kind of the crux of this conversation, which is what are the best practices? I think we've talked a lot about best practices, but maybe lessons learned in giving board presentation, and maybe any surprises, something that you didn't expect to happen that you had to kind of deal with. So Denise, let's start with you.
So one of my best practices that the people who work with the board remind you, do not read your slides. You need to assume the board read them. That's kind of the kiss of death if you're reading the board their slides that they already read. So that's why it's important, as I said before, make your slides clear, put the assumption at the top so they're not trying to figure it out, and then speak to those slides using stories, peer comparison, and analogies. I think that is a best practice. Also, these are some things that have happened to me. Be prepared that you may be moved. So during the time slot during the day, you got to be flexible when you're updating the board, because you may be moved, or they may say you have to shorten it. So, and as far as questions, I'd say be prepared if they ask you for dates on anything that you are presenting. And when providing answers is really, I think, important to give some peer comparisons. This is something simple, but do not be distracted if people are eating or moving around or leave the room. The board comes in and they're sitting there probably 2 or 3 days in a row all day. So just know that's just part of it, right? And then practice, practice, practice. The more I have my speaking points nailed, the more comfortable I'm in, and that enables me to be confident. So as far as surprises, though, I can never predict the questions. So I just kind of quit even trying to take a guess at the questions. If I know what's going on in the industry, that's how I prepare. But I just cannot predict the questions. So you just need to relax, let them roll in, recognize you're the subject matter expert, and they rely on you for an answer. And if you don't have the answer, it's okay to say, I'll get that back to you. And then the board secretary is always sending follow-up to the board meetings. So, if it's whatever, I wouldn't say, if you clearly don't know the answer, don't fake it. They can sniff that out. So, and it's okay to say, I'll get back to you on that report or something like that. So that's my advice.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I mean, they really want to hear from you because you're the expert. They're not trying to stump you. They're trying to understand. And they may have questions that you haven't prepared for, but you're the expert, right? So good advice. Yeah, go ahead.
I can personally say the only thing I had to follow up on was an article they wanted me to send them. So that wasn't bad, so that was an easy one. But I have attended board meetings where they ask for something that's a little bit off the topic, and people get back to them later through the board secretary.
Yeah. And the other thing too is they know you now, right, Denise? I mean, you've been doing that role, so you've gained their confidence. And I think that makes it even better and easier for you to, not that you won't prepare, but it makes it easier for you because you've established that credibility.
I know the 4 people that will ask me questions too.
Good. All right, Ellen, how about you?
Yeah, I would say maybe, lessons learned. The time can be moved. The time can be also a little shorter than planned. So just be prepared that your messages maybe has to be delivered a little faster. When you are part of a topic, it can also relate that if this other topic is first and they have more questions on it, that your time is cut shorter. So just to deal with that, I mean, it's always up to them to extend their time and delay the other topic. But I would say, yeah, be prepared for a shorter version of your messages. Definitely, that's maybe some surprises or some lessons learned. Could also be that just around this time frame, there is a big business decision, there's big company decision. So that means their mind is kind of taken away from a data topic or a digital topic and brings them into a much bigger challenge in the company. So to get them back on the data side might be difficult from a mindset perspective, because this other topic is just a bit, is it a merger or is it something, organizational changes, or even, let's say, political topics which are coming from the outside into the company where they have to act fast. So it could be that the attention from everybody is not the same, because everybody has maybe a different role to play at that time. So just be mindful. I was also surprised that not everybody was asking a question. There were a couple of people asking more questions, and there were more people quiet. So I was wondering later, okay, why were they quiet? So I think they had no questions to answer at that time, and the board is really good. And they only speak up if they really have a questions, which helps the board to evaluate. So be mindful that, I would say the lessons learned is don't be surprised if there is not from everybody a question or a topic. They are very intentional with their communication. What I would say, I was maybe confronted with some tough questions at that time. I was not as long in the company, and they said, okay, we have tried this 10 years ago. So of course I was not aware what 10 years ago happened. I was prepared roughly what was happened, but I could not answer in the details. So you basically, the lessons learned is, don't get too much in the detail of the past, focus on the things you're doing right now and which brings the company forward. When you typically go in with a sponsor, so I went in with a CIO, he can also help and facilitate a conversation when it's more in the past, which is before your, let's say, your own area of responsibility at that time. So the other question, funny question I got, okay, when are we finished? So when are we finished with data? So that was an interesting question. I was not prepared for that, because for me, data is always a journey. My 30 years of career, nobody has ever asked me that question. But I think the question was not as meant like this. It was more, when are we good enough to compete? So I had to translate that message. It was not about when are we finished. So when are we good enough to really leverage it? So, and of course, you can give some answers, but they might ask you for a time frame. So I was confronted with a time frame. Of course, I had a time frame prepared, but that might not be in their liking, so what the reality is. So there's always kind of, do you compare that with the reality, or do you basically go stepwise in a more stepwise approach? So that's maybe the lesson learned I have.
Sometimes the simple questions are the hardest ones to answer, right? I mean, it's such a simple question. I've been asked that all the time. When are you done, right? And
exactly.
So that's a good way to reframe it. Can I ask you?
Maybe I can say something, as Denise is in this position 8 years, so you can see you are never done, right? So I think she's a very good example that there's always work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess a question for both of you too, and then we'll start to wrap it up is, well, first of all, do you ever get feedback about your session from the board? And then the second one is like, so you've presented to a lot of executives in your time, right? And in the company and in this role. So what do you find is different about presenting to the board than presenting to any other senior executive in your company? So Alan, let's start with you, and then we'll wrap it up with Denise.
Yeah, I would say my experience is when you go in different leadership below the board, the deeper you go in the organization, the more the people want to have details. So they want to have more details and more related to their area. So make it kind of personal for them in their area of responsibility. So that's maybe the change. You don't look at the whole company, but they want to have it more specific for, let's say, a business unit or a function where you're presenting to. typically you know also more people, so I think when you're coming into the leadership on the next level, that's maybe more the community you are more constantly talking with, so they know you better. They know how the teams are connected, and they trust. So if you have built trust, I think they ask some other questions and good questions, or provide some feedback right away. That's maybe the different scenario.
And have you ever gotten feedback on your section of the board meeting?
Yeah, I got it from the CIO I was reporting to. Yes, he's providing feedback. He's providing actually excellent feedback.
Okay, great. Denise, how about for you?
As far as my specific session to the board does give feedback. They'll often write an email for that whole session, how they thought it went. And of course, my boss gives me specific feedback too, because he'll be talking to the board members afterwards. So that's always good, because I want feedback.
Your boss right in the meeting as well, Denise? Or
yes. Yep, he is there. Yes. And then as far as, the difference between talking to the board or internal executive committees within the firm itself, like Alan said, the internal executives you talk about, they want to hear about what my business and their business. So how is my business helping their business? Additionally, depending on which executive I talk to, you get more into the financial aspect of things and the cost of things. We don't get into that in my board update, because that's an update on my business. They get a separate financial update, and that's not drilling down into Denise's organization. So when I'm meeting with people internally with PNC, we often get into the financials, the cost, time frames, just the details. But I think the financial detail is one of the biggest differences for me. So definitely there's more challenging and drilling of each other, which I think is good, because we are getting down to the nuts and bolts of how we're going to do this together.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let me go ahead and start to wrap it up, and then I am going to ask both of you if I've missed anything in the wrap up and anything else that you wanted to add. So first of all, I want to thank you both for sharing your perspectives and your experiences, and so being so frank and honest with us. It's really helpful, and I know many of you that are on this session are either preparing for it or will be preparing for it soon. And I want to thank, obviously, MIT for hosting this session. I think it's very, very valuable. Look, my takeaway, I've started to write down notes as you were all talking. The first one that I put down is, hey, be prepared. Practice, 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 but also be extremely flexible. You may not get the full time that you want. You may get moved around. So you've got to be able to kind of be on your toes when you have these presentations. You also both talked about it maybe in a little different way, but kind of know your facts, know your dates, know your numbers, because you may get asked that question. In some cases, you have slides. Sometimes you don't have slides. But either way, you kind of have to know your numbers. Both of you agreed on it's very important to talk about the business value and to do storytelling and to put the kind of the business benefits in the middle, not necessarily the kind of the data speak. Although sometimes it's good to have some of those data numbers, like Denise said, the data quality numbers. And then the other one that I took away here, by the way, is just be confident. Be confident that they're there to hear you because you're the expert. They're not trying to stump you. They're just trying to make sure that they understand the topic. So be confident. Don't always have to know all the answers, but kind of being able to kind of show that you know your material and can confidently tell the story to the board. And the more you do it, the more they'll get to know you as well. So that was my key takeaways from both of your discussions. But let me, Denise, maybe start with you. Anything that I missed in that summary of, and also anything else maybe that I didn't ask that you wanted to share with the audience?
So the list that you just went through, I thought was great. I would just add the other that I think it's extremely important to have a clear, concise executive summary at the front and tell them why you're there. Or am I there for an update, or am I there for approval? Just set the stage very clearly so they know what to listen for.
Thank you. Ellen?
Yeah, you summarized it very, very good. So I have nothing really specific to add. The only thing is maybe, stay in that course. There will be more updates to come. So when you have an uncomfortable situation, just overcome that, be resilient, take it as an opportunity to provide a next update in a different way. So that's maybe my add here. So don't get disencouraged, stay confident, you know your topic, you are the expert, and yeah, that's very important.
Okay, great, good. Well, look, again, I want to thank you both. I wanted to thank MIT. And if you want to continue this conversation, because you're just about to have a board conversation, you've got our contact numbers here that we'll provide to you, as well as where you can find us on LinkedIn. We will also be answering questions on the Whova platform. So if you've got a question, feel free to put that there, or directly send us an email. So with that, I really thank you for joining, and we hope that you found this session interesting and informative.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Great session. Thank you, Maria, Ellen, and Denise. A lot of very interesting thoughts and very relevant for a lot of people who have to talk to the board. I certainly learned a lot myself, so thanks for that. We are going to break for an hour, and we will be back with a great session on machine learning. It will be my co-producer, Andy Palmer, who would be introducing it at 1:30 p.m. So hopefully we will see you then. Thank you.